Welcome to the I Fired My Boss franchise podcast. My name's Dan Claps, founder and CEO of Franchise Playbook, a franchisor platform where we create, own, and operate dynamic franchise brands in the mobile services space. And my life's goal is to help people just like you fire their boss and become a business owner.
And I'm Christian Dadulak, top franchise consultant and co-founder of Real Franchising, a leading franchise consulting firm. And together, we're on a mission to help people fire their boss, hire themselves, and live the American dream through franchise ownership.
Welcome to another episode of the I Fired My Boss podcast. Very excited about today's episode. We have our guest, Mike Stamper, on. Mike is a serial entrepreneur. He has launched his own business from scratch with his wife that he built for many years and was able to exit that business to a large, probably billion-dollar company that we'll talk about. And after that business, Mike has a background in franchise consulting and also as a franchise owner in a mental health franchise that's definitely changing the game when it comes to mental health and providing that service to people all over America. And Mike will tell you more about his background. But before we introduce him formally and start chatting, I wanted to say hello to Christian, our co-host. How are you doing, Christian?
Doing awesome, man. Having an awesome day so far. Excited to talk to you, Mike. Thanks for coming on. And before we do jump into everything, just wanted to give a brief shout out and thank you to one of our sponsors who makes this podcast possible. And that is Silicone Signs Company based out of Salt Lake City, Utah. Amazing team. They're sponsoring this podcast episode. Maybe you've heard us talk about them before. And really what Silicone Signs do, what they do is they specialize in interior and exterior signage specifically for the franchise industry. So, we've talked to many different people that have had nightmare experiences dealing with getting signage properly done in the right order and minimizing the headaches when ordering signs and working with sign vendors. And so we can tell you just from understanding Chase and his team over at Silicone Signs, they're the real deal. They have a team of designers, project managers. They're not just there to take your order, but they actually guide you through the entire sign process. And their goal is to approach that relationship as partners. So their goal is to take away many of the headaches that are associated with the signage process, like dealing with landlord requirements and approvals, permitting, tight installation schedules. And, just for some credibility purposes, they work with companies like Crumble Cookies, Capriati Sandwich Shop, Wing Zone, Dirty Dough, Handles Ice Cream, and more. So they're legit. They work with some of the best brands that are out there. And what's nice also is they don't have a sales force. Their model is just to become the preferred sign vendor for franchisors. And so since they don't have to pay expensive commissions, they're able to stay lean, compete nationwide, and they've done work in all 50 states and even Canada and Puerto Rico. So if you're a franchisee, you'd like to get a quote from them, check out their website. That's siliconesigns.com and request a call. Again, that's siliconesigns.com. They typically respond in a couple of hours. And then, of course, if you're a franchisor and are looking for a great sign vendor option, the CEO, Chase Dalton, would like for you to reach out to him directly. His email is chase@siliconesigns.com. And they do have an online request from their website that can get you connected with him as well. So again, siliconesigns.com. Thank you so much for making this podcast possible. Reach out to them today. And without further ado, let's jump right into this. So Mike, how you doing today?
Doing great. Fantastic day, middle of summer, ready to kind of jump into it and see what I can share.
Love it. Well, I think a good place to probably start is just your background. I know you have extensive business experience, like Dan had said. So how did you get into business, and then how did you ultimately find franchising?
Well, it's a great question. I have a very eclectic background. I originally went to school to become an architect. I actually ended up in engineering. So I have kind of a technical engineering background. But talk about life-changing things. There was a recession when I was working in engineering, so my company closed. The type of engineering I was on was designing subdivisions for housing projects. So when the housing goes out, a lot of things go out. So I was always fascinated by marketing, business, and sales, and wanted to own my own company. So I went into sales and marketing. And simultaneously, my wife and I actually created a cheerleading camp. She was a cheerleader in high school and college, and her dad had created a successful brand of basketball camps. So we wanted to emulate the cheer camps from that. What we found out very quickly was the cheer camps were not the same as basketball camps, obviously. And so we moved into the competition space. And the first competition we ran, I think we had a total of 6 teams, very scaled down. It was a high school gym. Fast forward to the time when we actually sold the company, we were doing events where we would have 8,000 participants, cheerleaders, and 25,000 spectators, doing them in an arena like any major arena in the country, where we would have $3-4 million of the light, sound, stage, and we would hire up to 300 people for the weekend to run the event. So it was like a rock show. It was like a American Idol meets Dances with the Stars doing event production. We also created a very successful apparel company that we sold at events and online, e-commerce. And for a while, we were actually producing obstacle races, which were extremely fun, and mud runs. And so we had a really good run with that. And during that period, we actually, to increase market share, it's very hard once you get to a certain point to grow organically, as everybody knows. So we actually started buying smaller companies, and we created multiple brands. Then we merged with another competitor of ours. So at the end of the day, we had like 8-9 different brands. And so we were constantly on the hunt to acquire new brands, new market share. So we bought some sound companies. If one particular market, I remember the Carolinas, we were really big in the Mid-Atlantic, the Northeast, and the Southeast, mainly East Coast. We were in 32 different states at the end. We were doing some stuff on the West Coast, but mainly East Coast. The North Carolina market, we could not really get any traction in. And there was a local company that pretty much had the majority of all the camp business and the business there. So we figured the best way to get that market share was to buy them. So then we went on a hunt to start buying smaller competitors and working out deals with them. And we're like, oh, this is kind of cool. We can play in that space. But there was one very large company out there, Varsity Brands, which controlled the whole entire industry internationally. So we ended up actually selling to them, right time, right place. And they had the backing of private equity, which we thought, well, maybe we can do that. Maybe we can buy Varsity. But then it's kind of like, well, that's a little unrealistic, because I think at the time, Varsity was generating $3 billion, and they had a lot of subsidiaries. They owned sports management company, television production company, uniform company, etc. So we did that transaction. We spent, I guess, about 26, 27 years, and basically made every mistake possible. When my wife and I started, we were 25 years old. We were literally making stuff up as we went along. At the time, the industry was not a mature industry, so it was kind of like the Wild Wild West. I mean, we were just, through creativity, sheer luck. There were a couple of nights that we literally stayed up all night and worked throughout the night prior to the competition because we had to. And so every aspect of the business, one of us actually did. And what was great when we actually sold the company is we had a very good staff. We were very mature, and we'd actually worked our way, myself and my partners at that time, to a position to where we could be more creative on the board and basically manage it from the top down. And so that education process in and of itself was very, very valuable. And so that is something, as far as a serial entrepreneur, I really like that experience that we gained from that. So after we sold, actually right before COVID, which is phenomenal, okay, because we have no idea what would have happened during COVID. We know what happened. Pretty much devastated everyone, including the event production industry for cheerleading events. Is I started looking at, okay, what's the next gig, so to speak? What am I going to do? Okay. Because towards the end, I really didn't have that same excitement as I did at the beginning, to where I was building a company. At the end, it was more about reading reports, analyzing, making sure everybody is doing the correct things, and producing the KPIs. So I started looking around for companies to purchase, because I'm like, what do I want to do? Do I want to create something? I know how long it actually took to create something from scratch. Okay, it takes forever. Policies, procedures, years to get into that and to get in their flow. So I'm like, well, I'll buy an existing company. So I started looking at existing companies, and a lot of them, it was kind of fluff. Okay, it just wasn't there. It didn't feel right. And from actually buying companies and selling companies, because we had actually sold off a couple of subsidiaries before we sold our main company to Varsity and private equity. It kind of gave me some experience in doing that, knowing what to look for. And what I found is some of the companies I was looking at were actually franchises. And so I started looking at that, and I'm kind of like, well, this is kind of interesting. Um, a business in a box. Okay. Somebody else has done all the work, the creative work. They've got a brand up and running. It's a proven uh, business, and kind of like plug and play. If you follow the directions and you do exactly what you're supposed to do and you add your own creativity into it, chances are you're going to have a very successful brand and a successful business. So I'm kind of like, that's kind of interesting. And then I found out there's an opportunity to become a franchise consultant to where you could consult, help, and educate people get into those brands. So I'm like, oh my God, this is like, how come I never knew about this years ago? So I'm like, I'm all in. So I became a franchise consultant. Also, with the goal in mind is to buy a franchise. So obviously, somebody who has built businesses, bought businesses, and sold businesses, that was kind of like a kid getting into a candy store. It's like, which one, whatever, what am I going to do? Blah, blah, blah. There's 1,000 different options in here. So what am I looking for? What's going to fit my needs and what, with my experience? So started looking around, and I would say that I probably looked during that period of trying to figure out what the next step is, what the next goal is. I probably looked at 150 to 200 different companies to purchase, which is, I would never recommend that to anyone. But I think I was being a little too picky, or I was looking for something that, wowed me or whatever. Then with Ellie, I became a multi-unit franchise owner with Ellie and purchased 6 territories. The decision for that was probably made in 36 to 72 hours. Okay, which after taking 2 years and looking at everything possible out there, that decision was made very quickly. And it wasn't like, I want to do this. It was like, how many territories I want to buy.
You know,
And so that's a very interesting change.
yeah, that's something interesting, Mike. And appreciate you sharing the background. But it's interesting. Like I, as you know, I'm a younger franchisor or a new franchisor, and being on this end, even though I've been in franchising for 10 years almost in development, it's fascinating that there's people that come into our process that they're early in. This is their first time looking at a brand, and then we have this other type of person, which happens a lot, which is they've looked, like you said, for a year or two, and they come into our process pretty much ready to make a decision within a few weeks. And I didn't, it's an interesting thing. Sometimes all those initial research just leads you to knowing exactly what it's like dating, right? If you dated
Yeah.
enough and you're ready, you know what you want. When you meet the right person, you can make that decision as you get more experience in that. It's the same thing. I love what you said about it being a recipe and just following, franchising to a T. Someone once recently told me franchising, I used to think of it like cooking, but then I realized that cooking, you can do a little bit of your own way and you can eyeball it. It's actually more like baking, right? When you bake, you got to follow everything to a T, or you can ruin
Right.
the cake. And so, you're really following a baking recipe, not a cooking recipe.
That's a great
Um,
analogy.
yeah, it's right. And if you think about it, you can't really, you have to bake exactly to the way that the instructions go.
Hmm. Yeah. And I think, well, first of all, any follow up on that? Because I'd like to talk about what that buying decision was.
Yeah, yeah, I think
Absolutely.
that's what we'd love to hear about. I mean, what
Yeah.
was your criteria, and how did that go?
Well, for me, part of what I wanted to do, and something that also really attracted me to franchising, is you can be an owner operator, okay, to where you can have one territory, and depending on what your investment range is, you can, you know, operate that business, be the salesperson, do everything. And I think it's fantastic for a lot of people who are transitioning out of a current career, or they want to create something better for their family, okay, financially. There's also the semi-absentee executive level. Nothing is semi-absentee, as they say. But the executive level, actually getting to that point in the previous companies I own, really showed me that this can be done. And if you have a good management team in place and you have everything set up, like you have an attorney you work with, you have your CPAs, you have your financial advisors, if you have this group of people, this network, then at that point, it's really good to look at multi-unit because first of all, the economy of scale, each territory is going to become more profitable. So I was definitely looking for something that could be an executive level model. And I also wanted something that, and this is just for me, I didn't want a lot of moving parts as far as inventory or brick and mortar. And everybody's a little bit different on that. So I wanted something that was simple, that was easy to understand, as well as it was kind of new and fresh out there. And so that was a major thing for me to really get in on an emerging brand and ride that brand. And basically, to me, it's fun. It's a lot of energy, and I don't want to say it's a little bit harder. I think the only thing with that is to be patient because with a new emerging brand, they're still creating the systems and policies and procedures. They have everything in a box and a manual, so to speak. But once more units come into the system, they're constantly modifying it, making it a better brand. Give you an example with Ellie. Ellie basically took off, went through the roof. You know, over 500 territories in 24 months. Amazing, okay? Because it's new, it's fresh, it serves a purpose that everybody is aware of. The country needs more of it. Every time you turn on the news, everybody's talking about mental health. Also, for me, the personal connection was it's a way to destigmatize it. Like most people, I've had people in my family struggle with mental health issues. So I'm kind of like, this is also a great way to give back. This is a way to help destigmatize it. And if I can take my skill set, marketing, operations, building companies, and put that into it, that's a lot of fun. Okay. And it's really cool to see a brand from the very beginning do that. So what Ellie did, which is a sign of a good franchisor, they looked around at all the people who jumped on, particularly early, and said, hey, look, let's get a steering committee, like a franchisee committee. And so they selected 9 people across the country. I'm happily one of them, where we basically work with corporate and make recommendations back to corporate. And in corporate, in return, bounces ideas off of us. And so that is something that we actually can help a little bit, things that we see out in the field on a daily basis to help corporate and make it better for everyone. So everybody's going to have a different criteria, but for me to have that semi-absentee executive level model and use the skill set that way, that's for me. You know, for somebody else, it may not be. They may not want to take on that responsibility, you know, because at the end of the day, we'll probably have 75 to 100 employees when it's all said and done with the territories.
Yeah. Yeah, the business you're into is great because of like the tangibility to it, right? I love the office, what you're going to get to build out, and you're going to have 6 of those. You're going to have a big tangible, footprint. I too like that myself. Like I'm so excited. I told you before we started recording, we're building out our facility in Madison, Wisconsin. It's going to house a lot of people, and I'm used to having a lot of people in an office, and being able to see and touch and feel and that's cool. Although I think in your business you can't legally work in it, right, Mike? You got to have an office outside of the facility. Is that?
Yeah, and thank you for bringing it up. And that was another huge factor. Once I realized it's kind of like, I can't work in it.
I don't know how you can get more 70. That's funny.
Yeah, it's forced semi-absentee because
Yeah.
you have to be a licensed therapist, right?
Yes, you have to be a licensed therapist, clinical director, psychologist, psychiatrist. And and I think another thing, everything's a little bit different, but for us, a huge thing with Ellie is taking commercial insurance. And so I didn't even know, for example, that you could go see a therapist and your insurance would pay for it. And so that was kind of a new concept to me because I'm like, does everyone know about this? And so what we found out very quickly through marketing and advertising, you say to people, yeah, we take your insurance. They're like, when can I schedule?
It's amazing. And from what I understand, at the corporate level of Ellie, they handle the insurance billing and a lot of the typical headache that you might have in a clinic, don't they?
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. And that is also something that attracted me to Ellie, and there's a lot of brands out there like that, is looking at what's done on the back end as far as shared services. For us, we have insurance verification, somebody who schedules the appointment, as well as the billing, which is huge, and the collection of the bills. And that's something to where our collect rate is almost 100%, very, very close to it.
Wow.
We're 3 or 4 points south of that. So a lot of the shared services for the franchisor or in any type of franchise, the more that they can supply and take that off your plate, that's a huge thing because that's where a lot of work is done as a business owner. Now, we still have to look at those KPIs and manage it from a number perspective, but I would much rather do that than actually have a team of 10, 12 people go through that management to do it.
You
Yeah.
see it.
Go ahead,
I'm
Dan.
sorry, Christian. I'll just, sorry, we'll edit that out. You see it more and more with franchising. Like I was just having this conversation with someone that was looking at real estate, and you see more and more real estate investors looking at franchising as a vehicle to invest in. And so, as a franchisor, you'd be silly not to realize that in order to have those kind of investors want to buy into your business, though, you need to take a lot off the plate. You need to take hiring, help make easier hiring processes. Obviously, you're a little bit held by joint employer, but what you can to do, take off the hiring off their plate, lead generation off their plate, support from like in my business, we have to take as much of the bookkeeping, reporting, help with insurance billing off the plate of the franchise partner. In your business, the same thing with therapists. I love what you do because it's almost like the Uber of mental health. It's like all you're really doing is you're providing a mental health expert with a platform to work within. And I'm big into providing people just a platform to run with, right? And being, they almost have their own business. And because of the fact that they're licensed, they went to school for this, they're not going to just not show up. They're going to take it seriously. Mike, I had a question. What do you think, like, if you had to name the one thing that made that brand stand out to you and say, that's why I'm going to do this, and that's why I think it's going to take off as an emerging brand, what would you say was the number one reason?
That's a great question. And when I say this, you're going to say that may be one of the bizarrest things I've ever heard in my life. Okay. I believe that they have caught lightning in a bottle. And something that really caught my eye was they have some core values, and one of them is humor. And so humor and mental health do not go together when you think about it. Okay. But they literally have a series of t-shirts that, as I said earlier, I own an apparel company. So I've made up probably 1 million t-shirts at this point. They have the most comical t-shirts made up that they wear throughout the corporate office. And t-shirts of like all the feels, my therapist knows what you did to me, let that S go. And so I'm kind of like, they're branding mental health and making it comical and making a sense of humor. And I'm like, I've never even heard of that. I've never even seen that. So we're taking that energy and that feel, and that is our hook to hire therapists and to bring them in. It's like, look, if you want to get a scooter and paint your hair purple, green, orange, change it every day, okay, and ride up and down the hallway, we're all for it. And so that was a culture that we had, that we built our business on previously. So we love that. I fell in love with it. My wife fell in love with it because our impression of that industry, everybody's uptight, everybody's serious. And then suddenly it's kind of like, wow, you're wearing comical t-shirts and it's okay to like poke fun at something and everything. And I'm like, I like that culture. So a lot of it is the culture. It's basically, it's the culture. If you tie it back to something, to see the t-shirts and that, we can destigmatize this. We can have fun with it. But at the end of the day, it's very helpful and it's a business.
Yeah, just to piggyback to that, I know Christian, you had a question. It's interesting. Like someone asked me this question, like, what's the benefit of investing in an emerging brand? And I give, and anyone listening that's potentially investing in Voda, I'd say the same thing to you on a call with me. I tell people that the benefit of getting an emerging brand is obviously you get great territory and you get access to the leadership team at a different level. But I also would make the argument that if you don't think my brand with 100 units open and running is going to be a better brand than it is today, you're crazy. Of course, it's going to get better. And so to me, one of the biggest benefits of getting an emerging brand is life's not just about making money, right? There's just one ingredient. You know that we were just having this conversation about money only goes so far, right? I know you had an exit in your last business. We need value. We need peace of mind. We need purpose. We need to have some fun with the people we're working with. And so I always say to people, if they want to get an emerging brand, part of it really truthfully is just the experience, the culture, the fun, to be on the ground level, to be able to say I was one of the, in your case, 33 or 35, I think you said franchisee number 33. Did you say
35?
35. And, that has inherent value. It's not all just about how much money can I make out of this business. Being on the ground level has a lot of value too. So I hear that in your voice. Like I can hear like you're enjoying being part of something that's bigger than yourself. That's going to really change, mental health for the better and put it on every street corner. That's what I think you guys are doing. You're taking a fragmented industry and creating a consolidated experience on every corner of America.
Absolutely. And it's also the approach where there's a lot of people in the space now that are particularly doing telehealth, which was, that became huge during COVID. However, the movement in the industry and what a lot of people are finding is people still want to come in person. So we offer a true hybrid model. So a lot of things like that Ellie has planned for the future, such as virtual reality therapy, okay, and other types of therapy that are on the surface for PTSD and things like that, and being able to work with first responders. And it is very exciting. So we're literally, as we say, we're trying to, change it. And with an industry like, doing what you're doing, Dan, you can still stand out even though there's a lot of competitors because it's not the same old, same old. Okay. You're doing something new, fresh, exciting. And so that's going to attract a certain type of individual who wants to be part of that if they have multiple choices in the franchise world. It's kind of like the burger wars. Which one do you choose? Well, you choose the brand, unless there's one right on your street corner you want. You choose the one you're comfortable with, the one that you like for whatever reason.
Yeah, I loved your answer, Mike, about the lightning in a bottle aspect of the number one thing you really liked about Ellie. I mean, in addition to everything else that they provide, but I think that this is said so often, it's become a cliche, but it's a cliche because it's true. And that's, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And I think it is really nice that you can bring humor to another. I mean, maybe on the surface, humor and mental health don't seem to go together. Maybe they do seem counterintuitive. But when you dig a little bit deeper, it is nice to make an inviting environment where it's fun for the therapist. It's inviting for the people that are coming in to get help, and it's destigmatizing it. And I think that that's amazing. And so I think so many people out there in business, they think that they need to create the next iPhone or the iPod or something like that. And if you just have a similar concept, maybe just a different way of doing things or a more inviting environment and amazing culture. And not to say that Ellie is not different in a million other ways beyond that, but I think that that's just so unbelievably true. And so I love what you said there. I guess a question I have as well is in terms of multi-unit ownership and the benefits of it, the economies of scale, what was your mindset behind getting 6 versus 10 versus 1 or 2 or 3? I mean, how did you settle on that number? What was it? What was the mindset behind that?
A lot of it came down to demographics and risk and starting out. And so with an emerging brand, particularly with Ellie became so hot is that within a say a major metropolitan area, you may have 3 or 4 or 5 different groups looking for the same market. So a lot of it came down of trying to figure out what the demographics are, what the territories are, and kind of carving those out. So at the very beginning, one of the hardest things for any franchisor is to determine how do we define a territory. You're going to use the normal things: population, um, household income, number of single family homes, depending on what you're doing. You want to look for that right fit no matter what you do. So it kind of came out to that. Now, why six? Because that kind of fit in the county that we're in. We're in a county of maybe about 700,000 people between Baltimore and DC. We're in Annapolis, Maryland. And so with that, it enabled us to cover the whole entire county and a little bit of another county. So that's what it came down to at the end. Now, what a lot of people in LA are doing, um, within any type of franchise that's merging like that, you have a couple different types of groups that jump in. And actually seeing it on this side helps me better communicate as a franchise consultant to clients who want to jump into franchising. The people who want to get a couple territories, one or two, and want to be an owner operator, that's fantastic. But there's a lot of people that want to get in and have 5, 6 to start out. There's a lot of LA owners that have 6 for some reason. There's a couple that have 10. And some of the individuals, their goal is once they get their original market developed, they want to go to other places in the country that have opening and develop there and eventually get up to 30, 40 units once they figure out how to do it. So multi-franchise, owning multi units of a franchise, to me, I think is the way to go, particularly if it's something that you believe that you can handle. Also, I like multi-unit, multi-brand. And there's a lot of people in the industry that do that don't initially think about that. And going to the multi-unit franchise conference and talking to people who do that, to me, was really eye-opening, because I'm kind of like, that's exactly what we did before. Even at the end of the day, this brand here specialized in this brand specialized in that, but they're all under one roof, and it's exactly how most private equity firms work. And from a business person, somebody who's really in tune with business, when you look at the economy of scale that you can do, where you have, let's say you have a professional who is managing your books, your reports, your compliance, each one becomes much more cost effective. Okay. And they don't have to necessarily be in the same industry. And so I met a guy at that conference who owned 6, hair salon type franchises. Then he owned food. And then I think he may have had a home service brand for restoration. I'm like, none of these make sense. Okay. But he basically figured out how to make that work. And so he was looking for the opportunity and what would fit within what he could do. And so the one thing that we're limited on is time. So I kind of look at it like I will end up buying another brand, multi-unit similar brand. I can't tell you what it is. I can't tell you when it's going to be.
I thought you said it was Voda.
Very well could be. Very well could be.
Just kidding.
Is, when you look at it, it's kind of like, what is the model? How's it going to work with what you're trying to achieve as far as your personal goals? And are you comfortable, being in that culture, in that environment?
Yeah, it's interesting. I couldn't agree with you more about, like, all business is the same at the principles. Like, if you understand how to run a business in restoration, you could do mental health or cookies, it doesn't matter. But, I learned a lot. Like, obviously your company is owned by, or Ellie is owned by private equity, by Princeton Equity Group. Great firm. They bought my last company, and I had the opportunity to work for that company for a couple of months and learned so much about how to just structure a company the right way, put the right people in the right seats. I went on to then read a ton of books on that type of industry, and how, my biggest thing was, how does someone that is not in an industry get into it and be able to run it so well, and from those principles. And I think it's because all businesses do have the same kind of core principles. And it's funny because, like, we have that with people that are looking at Voda. I always explain it, like, if you think you're going to be cleaning floors or extracting water from basements, like, that's not the business you're going to be in. You're going to be in the leading of people business, lifting people up. And the higher up, like, the little bit of success I've had so far, the higher up I go, the more I realize my job is just to lift people up push people's people's, past what they think they can do. And that would be the same in any business you own. So once you learn how to really run a business, I think they're all very similar. And then there's just nuances to each one. But with what you do, it's just great because you're helping people during a time of need. I'm helping people during a time of need. Christian, you're helping people find a business during a time of need of what they want to do. And again, that goes back to, I think, the idea of you love what you do. It's not just to make money. Actually, I've been to the Discovery Day for LA, and I think that's the first thing Chris, one of the founders there, asks is why you're here. And I think if your answer is just to make money, they don't really want you to be in the system. From what I remember going there, but
yeah, they have a selection process, and I saw them turn people away at my Discovery Day, and people that just kept on talking about how much money am I going to make, what's in it for me, so to speak. That's not a good partner for that brand, because yes, you're going to make money, but there's also another reason behind doing this business. But Dan, you're absolutely correct in what you're saying. All businesses are the same. I remember something that really helped me. I used to be a big reader. Well, I still am, of books or education. But then also myself and my partners, we had a mentor that actually, it was kind of a weird situation, but he worked with us for a few years and guided us through things. And he constantly used to tell me particularly, he goes, look, as soon as you can wrap your mind around the fact that you don't have to do everything in your company, you can delegate and create these systems, policies, and procedures. He goes, you can own 50 companies. And he goes, and work less and make 10 times the amount of money. And I'm like, well, our business is different. He goes, see, right away, you weren't even listening. He goes, at the end of the day, it's all the same. Okay. You're filing the same form for your taxes. The lines in the taxes are the same. Okay. So, but I'm like, yeah, well, we do this, and this is why we're different. He goes, it doesn't matter. The IRS doesn't care.
Well, that's because like what made you your money probably in the early days, the hustling, right? The CEO, to be a CEO, you have to kill the hustler. So like what got you to where you are today, which was being the hustler, to be a great manager of business, you have to actually get rid of that mentality and get yourself more into like a mentor and like helping people decide, make decisions themselves without you, and just help them kind of steer them. But that's the opposite of the hustler. The hustler just wants to go, I'll do it myself, get out of the way. I can do it faster or better, whatever. And I think that's a big learning curve for a lot of people when they get into owning a business. It's not about doing everything yourself. It's actually quite the opposite.
Correct. And it depends on what your job is. And then after I, became better at like coaching people and training people, something I would tell, we used to have to lay out these cheerleading floors. And so we'd always have to hire a crew to do it. Either we brought them with us or we hired them local. And I would always teach whoever the production manager was, it's like, look, the minute your back is turned and you're doing this, the crews over here are probably doing nothing. So what you need to do is to teach them and show them and always be available in front of them where they can see you. Don't turn your back on them because you're proving how fast you can do it, but you're not showing them how to do it.
I think that makes a ton of sense. Before we wrap up, Mike, I briefly wanted to touch on the build-out process a little bit because I know that's something that is very easily to do wrong if you don't do it the right way. And what's nice about Ellie is you don't need some Class A retail front, but still there is a little bit of a build-out involved. So what was that process look like? What have you learned from it? What are some of the do's and don'ts that you would offer to someone else that's maybe getting into more of a brick and mortar or some kind of business where there is some level of a build-out?
I think the key with that is to develop a relationship with a good real estate broker and basically understand the market and the type of space that you want and how to negotiate the lease. Because in the FDD in item 7, they're going to give you a wide range of what the cost is. And depending on the type of business that you have, retail is very coveted now. Office space is not coveted. Flex space is kind of in the middle. So understanding that process and then understanding that the permit process oftentimes takes a lot longer than what people think. And do your homework on that. And this is the business person in me. A lot of people do not understand tenant improvements and basically the costs and how that can fluctuate your cash flow. And to really look at that, is it better to not take cash and do that, get that built into a lease somehow, amortize it over the life of that lease, save that cash, which is king, and use that for your backup cash. And so that is something that I think that a lot of franchisors could probably help. Ellie did a great job of it, Reppelman, talking about that. But just having done it before, I see a lot of first-time franchisees kind of stumble with that process.
Absolutely. And there's certainly an order of operations to it too. You got to make sure you do things in the right order, and there's a lot to know. I mean, there's a book, I'm blanking on it right now, but I think it's called Brick and Mortar Success, specifically as it relates to franchising. And the author, again, I feel bad for blanking on her name, but she built out all the McDonald's, and it was actually kind of her idea along with some other people to build out and put all the McDonald's and Walmarts. And so she talks about what the build out process is, horror stories. So you got to make sure you do it the right way, which is why I wanted to ask you, because I know that, there's some nuance to it. But the nice thing is, since Ellie is partnered with the Reppem group, I know that they have a division, Build 'em, that specifies and specifically works and helps and coaches franchisees with helping them through that build out process. So I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, and it's basically, once again, following the directions, and then also that is something that it is essential that the franchise owner control the cash during that process and not let it get out of hand. And so that is one piece of advice that I would give, because cash is king. Saving your cash for when you need it.
Fantastic. Well, I guess as we wrap up, we're at the top of the hour here. Dan, did you have anything else?
No, Mike, appreciate the time. Obviously, we've known you for a while, and appreciate taking some time to join the I Fired My Boss podcast about how you've, I guess you fired your boss a long time ago, but you've continued to be successful in being an entrepreneur and business owner, and wish you a ton of success. If you're enjoying the I Fired My Boss podcast, please do leave us a review or hit the 5-star button. We're continuing to grow this podcast. We enjoy spreading the positive information about the good, bad, and the ugly of owning your own franchise business. So thanks for listening in, and we'll see you on the next episode.
All right, guys. Thank you, guys.
You're f***ing fired. If you want to say those words to your boss, make sure you head on over to ifiredmybosspodcast.com and fill out the form to schedule a no-cost consultation. And if you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share with a friend who might also want to fire their boss.